Hello juniors, welcome to week 18 of our distance learning. Today in this video we will be covering the 7th and the 10th commandments together. So we're going to jump right in. So the 7th commandment, you shall not steal. Our objectives are to explain the meaning of you shall not steal, to describe the concept of universal destination of goods, to determine whether it is moral to own private property, to name offenses against the 7th commandment. We'll explain the concept of commutative justice. We'll evaluate the morality or immorality of gambling. We'll describe our moral obligations towards creation, and we will explain the 7th commandment as it relates to Jesus' command that we love the poor. All right, respect for goods. The 7th commandment forbids unjustly taking or keeping the goods of one's neighbor and wronging him in any way with respect to his goods. It also commands justice and charity in the care of earthly goods and the fruits of men's labor. Christian life strives to order this world's goods to God and to fraternal charity, the common good. So most of what we cover in the next several slides are going to come back to these three main ideas. All right, so we got a big concept here, the universal destination and the private ownership of goods. So universal destination, universal, remember that means that it applies to everybody. Destination means where does it belong? So the universal destination of goods means what are we supposed to do with the goods that have been given to all of us? And then private ownership. The goods of creation are destined for the whole human race. However, the earth is divided among men to assure the security. Sorry guys, I'm having a technical issue here. Okay. However, the earth is divided up among men to assure the security of their lives, endangered by poverty and threatened by violence. So, yes, the world's resources are given equally to everybody. We are all entitled to a share of what God has given. But it is okay to divide up that property among us to ensure that we don't go hungry or that we have what we need for our protection and safety. The appropriation of property is legitimate for guaranteeing the freedom and dignity of persons and for helping each of them to meet his basic needs and the needs of those in his charge. So if we have families, we are absolutely entitled to the property that we need in order to provide their safety and their health. The right to private property, acquired or received in a just way, does not do away with the original gift of the earth to the whole of mankind. You are entitled to own a little piece of property. You are entitled to things that do belong to you, as long as we recognize or that everybody else is entitled to those things as well. The universal destination of goods remains primordial. Primordial means from the very beginning of time. So that's number one. So our desire for private property and our ownership of private property can't contradict the basic human truth that everybody is entitled to a share of what God created. Political authority has the right and the duty to regulate the legitimate exercise of the right to ownership for the sake of the common good. This is a good thing. It might sound a little scary that the government has that power, but remember, the government is supposed to act for the common good. So as long as they're doing that, they are free to regulate the distribution of private property, the fair distribution of private property. Okay. All right, so this same topic continued. The 7th commandment forbids theft, and theft, by definition, is the usurping of another's property against the reasonable will of the owner. Other things forbidden by the 7th commandment: deliberate retention of goods lent or of objects lost. So if you borrowed something from somebody and you refuse to give it back, you are technically stealing. If you lost something that somebody lent to you, that is a form of stealing if you don't make an attempt to return it to them. Business fraud, paying unjust wages. If you are in a position someday to own a business where you are responsible for paying people what they deserve, if you don't pay them what they deserve, it is a form of stealing. It devalues their work and their contributions. Forcing up prices by taking advantage of the ignorance or hardship of another. Some of us are experiencing that right now. When the pandemic first began, we know that there were people who were going to stores and hoarding up all the supplies that we need. Like, why is there a toilet paper shortage? people are buying up like the rubbing alcohol and medicines and things like that. And then they're trying to sell them to other people at a huge markup. So, and that's a little bit different than supply and demand. If you've taken an economics course, it's okay to raise a price if something is harder to get, but to simply hike up a price to an unreasonable amount to take advantage of people's hardships is immoral. If you are an employee or if you have a task and you do your work poorly, that is a form of stealing. Tax evasion and unjust or exorbitant taxes. Now, I probably should have put two separate bullet points for that, but tax evasion means you have taxes you're supposed to pay and you refuse to pay them. But unjust or exorbitant taxes means that the person or the institution who is taxing you to a rate to such an extent that your taxes are no longer going to serve some common good. They're going to line someone's pockets for personal profit. Forgery of checks and invoices. If you write a bad check or lie on an invoice that you give to a customer, you are performing an act of theft. Excessive expenses and waste. So if you buy things to the point where somebody else who might need those things can't get them, that's a sin. And then willfully damaging private or public property. Okay, commutative justice. Try and say that with me. Commutative justice. Contracts are subject to commutative justice, which regulates exchanges between persons and between institutions in accordance with a strict respect for their rights. So let's elaborate a little bit. It requires safeguarding property rights, paying debts, and fulfilling obligations freely contracted. Without commutative justice, no other form of justice is possible. In other words, when we make agreements with people, they have to adhere to our natural rights in terms of property. They have to be fair in terms of the resources that they're offering, and they have to respect the right for us to own private property. One distinguishes commutative justice from legal justice, which concerns what the citizen owes in fairness to the community, and from distributive justice, which regulates what the community owes its citizens in proportion to their contributions and needs. I'm not too concerned with that right now, but it is part of the catechism, so I wanted to stick it there. Commutative justice is the basis for all justice. It's the justice that adheres to our basic human rights. Gambling. Let's talk about this one. Games of chance, like card games or what have you, or wagers, are not in themselves contrary to justice. In other words, there's nothing wrong with them on their own. They're games. But they become morally unacceptable when, one, they deprive someone of what is necessary to provide for their needs and those of others, or when a person becomes enslaved to it. So people can become very easily addicted to gambling. Unfair wagers and cheating at games constitute grave matter. So if you are playing a game of chance with somebody, and let's say you know something he doesn't, and you're trying to deceive him or her into gambling because you know you're going to win. So that's automatically cheating. It's not gambling if you already know the outcome. So I'm going to read that again. Unfair wagers and cheating at games constitute grave matter unless the damage inflicted is so slight that the one who suffers it cannot reasonably consider it significant. So if it's just a silly little game, then it's not really a problem. But if you are deliberately, knowingly causing somebody to gamble without a possibly reasonable fair outcome, then no, not okay. Okay. Respect for the integrity of creation. So the seventh commandment also applies to what our obligations are to the environment. Animals, like plants and inanimate beings, are by nature destined for the common good of past, present, and future humanity. That past, present, and future part is really important. Yes, you and I right now, we have a right to the things of this world. We have a right to breathe the air, to have clean water, to eat the animals that God has given to us. But we can't do so if our needs, or our desires, I should say, are going to negatively impact the generation that comes after us, because the future generations are also entitled to those same goods. Man's dominion over inanimate and other living beings granted by the Creator is not absolute, meaning we're not entitled to it in every single circumstance. It is limited by the concern for the quality of life of neighbor, including generations to come. It requires a religious respect for the integrity of creation. So we have to acknowledge that it comes from God and that it's a gift. Oops. God entrusted the animals to the stewardship of humans. Hence, it is legitimate to use animals for food, clothing, and medical research if done for the common good. It is contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly. It's likewise unworthy to spend money on them that should, as a priority, go to the relief of human misery. So, if we have a beloved pet and he becomes very sick, we take him to the vet. Vet says this operation is going to cost you $6,000 or whatever. I know how expensive vet bills can be. You really have to make a moral decision here, because if the money that is going to this pet's operation is money that is needed to take care of the needs of your family, then it would be the wrong choice to spend that money on the animal. And I know how much that probably irks some of you, but the real truth is that humans are more valuable than animals. We are the summit of God's creation. And so spending that kind of money on a human, on an animal, when somebody in our charge needs that money, is an immoral decision. One can love animals, but one should not direct to them the affection due only to, so beautiful. Okay, one can love animals, but one should not direct to them the affection due only to humans. So you cannot choose to love an animal more than a human person. You may have great affection for your animal. I know how much you guys love your animals. I feel that same way about my animal. But the truth is, our hearts need to go towards love of our human. In fact, as I'm saying this, my beautiful cat is right here, so I just want to show her to you guys. Come here, baby girl. Oh, she's such a mess right now. Elfie, can you say hi to everybody? No. Where is she? There she is. Oh, that's my baby. I love her, and I have spent a small fortune on her. Thankfully, I don't have children. Not thankfully. I mean, that's a blessing and a curse on some days. So I have to, I am in a little bit of a better position in terms of that. But we're going to move on because we're almost done here. Okay. Love for the poor. It is by what they have done for the poor that Jesus will recognize his chosen one. So when we are deciding how we're spending our money and how we're desiring money and wealth, it's really important that we measure it against this, because how we treat the poor is what is going to determine whether or not we are welcomed into heaven. Love for the poor is incompatible with an immoderate love of riches or their selfish use. I think that's basically what I was just explaining. Not to enable the poor to share in our goods is to steal from them and deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs. The demands of justice must be satisfied first of all. That which is already due in justice is not to be offered as a gift of charity. St. John Chrysostom. In other words, what God created, it's not sympathy that when we give to the poor, that's not sympathy. That's justice, because God made enough for everybody. So it's only fair. It is their right to receive enough food and resources so that they can sustain themselves. And then finally, those who are oppressed by poverty are the object of a preferential love on the part of the church. Remember the term preferential love. Preferential means they get first dibs. When it comes time to be serving people, the poor are the first ones who are entitled to extra care because they need it. It's justice. Okay, that's the 10th commandment. We're going to jump right in to, that was the 7th commandment. We're going to jump right into the 10th commandment. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So really what we're going to focus on here is what the word covet means. As we covered it in the 9th commandment, but we're going to go into a little more detail here. Okay, objectives. Explain the meaning of you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. 2, summarize the root or cause of covetousness. 3, name offenses against the 10th commandment. And 4, determine why detachment from material goods is important. Okay. I'm sorry, this presentation formatting is a little bit weird. Bear with me, guys. All right, the 10th commandment unfolds and completes the 9th commandment, which is concerned with concupiscence of the flesh. But as you can see down here, we're focusing now on concupiscence of the eyes. The 10th commandment forbids coveting the goods of another as the root of theft, robbery, and fraud, which the 7th commandment forbids. Lust of the eyes leads to the violence and injustice forbidden by the 5th commandment. So lust of the eyes, remember there were 3 types of concupiscence, and lust of the eyes is the lust that causes us to desire something. We see that like, oh, I really want that thing. And also keep the word desire in your mind. The 10th commandment concerns the intentions of the heart. With the 9th, it summarizes all of the precepts of the law. So the 9th and 10th commandments, because they're about covetousness, are really reminding us that our intentions are huge. They matter in terms of our own sinfulness. Okay, the disorder of covetous desires. The 10th commandment forbids greed and the desire to amass earthly goods without limit. It's okay to want things, but we can't want all of it. It forbids avarice, which is greed, arising from a passion for riches and their attendant power. So sometimes we desire goods and money and wealth because they come with power, because we know that if we have all of the money or all the things, that we will have a certain amount of influence. 10th commandment also forbids the desire to commit injustice by harming our neighbor in his temporal goods. So if our desire for goods causes us to want to do harm to somebody else, not a good sign. Our thirst for another's goods is immense, infinite, never quenched. Thus it is written, he who loves money never has money enough. Roman Catechism. Think about that quote for a second. He who loves money never has money enough. People who want money can't seem to get enough of it. It never seems to be enough to satisfy the need. We've talked about like constantly filling a void with the wrong thing, wondering why that void is getting bigger and bigger. Well, money is a big culprit in that. It is not a violation of this commandment to desire to obtain things that belong to one's neighbor, provided this is done by just means. So if you see, let's say you have a neighbor who's a little bit older than you are, and they're going to college and they're doing really well, and they go on to receive their PhD, and they start a business or they do something great, it's good to look at that and go, wow, that's really great. I want to do that for myself. That's different than envy, which we'll get to on the next slide. But before I move on, I want to draw your attention to all the things that are bolded in these first 4 bullet points. Desire, passion, desire, thirst. That is the nature of what it means to be covetous. So it's those intentions, it's those yearnings in our heart that lead us towards things that aren't God. They lead us to things of this world, not of the next. Okay. Oops. No, I got another one here. Okay, envy is a capital sin. You guys know that. It refers to the sadness at the sight of another's goods and the immoderate desire to acquire them for oneself. So envy is sadness at the sight of what someone else has. And it might even cause you to desire to acquire them, even if that means you do it unjustly. When it wishes grave harm to another, it is a mortal sin. So if your envy causes you to want to bring harm upon that person, mortal sin. Okay. St. Augustine saw envy as the diabolical sin. From envy are born hatred, detraction, calumny, joy caused by the misfortune of a neighbor, and displeasure caused by his prosperity. Detraction and calumny, remember, detraction is when you reveal secrets about someone to someone else, and calumny is when you lie about other people. All right, finally, we're going to end on a positive note. Poverty of heart. In the same way, every one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. These are Jesus's words in Luke chapter 14, verse 33, reminding us that if we want to be with him, we have to detach ourselves from the goods of this world, from our material possessions. The precept of detachment from riches is obligatory for entrance into the kingdom of heaven. We cannot get into heaven if the desire of our hearts is for something material. Christians are called to direct their affections rightly. That comes from a document called Lumen Gentium. Directing our affections rightly means we're desiring good things, not that we're storing up treasure in heaven, not little things that'll rot and decay. Desire for true happiness frees man from his immoderate attachment to the goods of this world so that he can find his fulfillment in the vision and beatitude of God. There's the clincher right there. Detaching ourselves from material goods helps us find our true fulfillment in God. It may sound cliche, you may have heard things worded like this before, but please take some time and sit with that concept. Desire for true happiness frees man from his immoderate detachments to the goods of this world so he can find his fulfillment in the vision and beatitude of God. And then finally, St. Gregory says it beautifully, I want to see God. This expresses the true desire of man, and we will not be able to see God if our minds are occupied by a love of material things. That is everything we have for this week. Congratulations, you guys. You have made it through the 10 commandments and you've done a beautiful job. So I hope that these lessons will stick with you for a very long time. And that's it. Wow, it feels like the end of an era. Great job, guys. I will see you later this week. Take care.